In this activity, we are going to determine the pH of these three household chemicals. In the process, you are going to learn how to use your Xplorer GLX to collect discrete data points, one for each of the chemicals, in a sampling mode we called manual sampling. During manual sampling, you will also label each of the pH data points with the corresponding chemical name. We will display this information in a two-column table on the Xplorer GLX, then add a third column to the table so that we can classify each of the chemicals as an acid or a base. But before we do any of that, we are going to calibrate the sensor to ensure the accuracy of our measurements. A lot of good stuff in this activity. So, grab everything you need, turn on your Xplorer GLX or open a new data file, and let's get started. Start out by plugging in your Passport pH sensor into the top of any one of the 4 ports on the Xplorer GLX. And we are not interested in pH versus time, so let's go to the home screen. Okay, because what we want to do is a number of things with the sensor, we are going to go to our sensor screen. So that you can do by pushing the F4 button. There are 3 things we need to do in this screen. First, calibrate the sensor. Second, set it up for manual sampling. And finally, we are going to show you how to use that reduce smooth / smooth averaging field in this screen here. Okay, to calibrate, we need to get to the calibration screen, which you do through the sensors menu. So push the F4 button to open that, and you see item 3 there is calibrate. Let's select it. The Xplorer GLX offers a variety of ways to calibrate your sensor. Fortunately, it defaults to the most common type of calibration for the sensor that you have connected. If you're interested in learning more about the types of calibrations you can do with your Xplorer GLX, you will want to refer to your Xplorer GLX User's Manual. We are going to do a 2-point calibration. Now, during a 2-point calibration, you put the sensor in the first of 2 standards. We are using buffer solutions, one at pH 4 and the other at pH 10. So you put the sensor probe into the first of the 2 solutions and tell the Xplorer GLX to read the raw value from the sensor and report it as the known value of the standard. Let me show you what I mean. Let's go ahead and take this and put it into our first solution. And then I'm going to have you, actually let's hold on to this right here. First let's scroll down to the bottom of this calibration screen. And you know you're at the bottom because you see only that up arrow there. Take a look at the last 4 fields there. You see that there are 2 each related to each of the 2 points that we use for the calibration. In the first of those 2 fields, we tell the Xplorer GLX the value of the pH standard that we are using. In the second field, there, we tell the Xplorer GLX which raw value from the sensor it needs to associate with that standard. How do you know what raw value to stick there? Okay, now let's stick this into our, let me rinse it off, into our buffer solution. Okay, it's actually quite easy, and it's not that value 4 that you see in there currently. Take a look near the bottom of the screen. There are 2 live readings there. The one on the right, labeled units, is the raw value that the Xplorer GLX sees from the sensor. That is the value that we want to put in that second field, also labeled units. Before we do that, let me point something else out to you. The reading on the left there is the actual pH value that the Xplorer GLX is reporting to us, which is 4.4, significantly above the value we know it to be, which is 4.0. That is what we would get, however, if we left that second field at 4. So let's change it. And the developers have made this easy for us to do. all you have to do is push the F3 button, which you see lets the Xplorer GLX read point 1. So push it, and now you see that that value has transferred into the field. And now all that's left to do is to repeat this for our second point. So we will put our probe into our pH 10 buffer solution, and we need to first tell the Xplorer GLX that this is a pH 10 solution, not 7 like it says there. So push the check mark and type in 10 and push the check mark again to accept that change. Okay, transfer the value that it sees there, which is 10.11 for the raw units, into that second field by pushing not the F3 button, but this time the F4 button, which lets the Xplorer GLX read point 2. And when you do that, you see that our live reading is now the correct one. So we have just finished calibrating. You don't think so? Just 2 points? Okay, all we need is 2 points, because for all the other points in between, because the nature of the calibration is linear, the Xplorer GLX can interpolate and extrapolate all the values in between and beyond the 2 points here. So yes, we are done with calibration. So push the F1 key to say OK. All right, the next thing we need to do is set up for manual sampling. Manual sampling is a data collection mode. Up until now, you've seen continuous sampling. That's the one with the moving clock that you see as the sample indicator on the top bar. During continuous sampling, the Xplorer GLX automatically continuously samples data points at the sample rate that the sensor is set up. Now, for manual sampling, you tell the Xplorer GLX to record one data point by the push of a button, and besides that, it comes back and prompts you to associate a value with that data point. So we need to change the sampling mode, and if you look, F1 will open our mode menu, and there it is, the second item on there, manual, and notice that it has a flag next to it. Push the check mark to accept that, and when you do, a new screen opens. This is a data property screen for keyboard data. So this is where you might want to pull out your keyboard if you have a compatible one. Not, actually is keypad data is fine. If you do have a keyboard, go ahead and plug it into the lower of the 2 USB ports on the right side of your Xplorer GLX. And the key mapping from the keypad to the keyboard is actually pretty intuitive. But if you have any questions about it, you can refer to your user's guide. Okay, this is where we tell the Xplorer GLX what we want to associate with that pH data point. And what we want to associate is the chemical name. So we're going to change that measurement name from keyboard data to chemical name, or just chemical should be fine. Push the check mark to accept that, or to begin editing, or if you're using a keyboard, push the enter key. And let's type in chemical using the multi-press text entry method by typing C and H E M. See how fast we can get at this. I C A and L. Did we get that right? Oh, we forgot a C, didn't we? Scroll over and type in, let's see if we can get that in the right spot. B, C. There we go. Check mark to accept that change. We don't have to worry about units or anything else, so push the F1 key, OK, to leave that screen. Now we're set up for manual sampling. And the last thing to do here is to explain to you what the reduce/smooth averaging field is. Now, if we were good experimenters, we would not record just one data point for each sample. We would determine several data points, average them, and report that average as the pH of our sample. That's what that field is for. So we can tell the Xplorer GLX to do that for us. And the only thing we have to do is tell it how many points we want it to use to calculate the average. So let's scroll down to that field with the arrow key, push the check mark to open up our options there, And let's select, say, 5 points and check mark. So we are just about ready to collect data. We have calibrated, we have set up for manual sampling, and we are now averaging. Let's go back to the home screen and decide how we want to display this information. Up until now, we've been using a graph display. But if you asked your students to record this information in a lab manual or a piece of paper, you would expect them to record it in a table, right? So let's open up a table display by pushing the F2 key. Now we've got a 2-column table, I should say, and in the first column we have pH, and in the second column we have nothing, it's undefined. What we want to see in that column is the chemical name. So we are going to turn on our hotspots. Just like the graph display, the table display has hotspots that you can use to change out measurement names or units and the run number. And just like the graph display, you turn on those hotspots by pushing a check mark. So push it to turn on the hotspots and use the arrow key to move over to that second column heading and push the check mark to open up our data sources. And there you see item number 2 there is the chemical name that we define when we set up for manual sampling. So push the check mark to select it. Okay, we are now ready to collect data. So take your probe, put it into your first sample, and push the start-stop button. And just like we promised, the Xplorer GLX is waiting for you to tell it to record a data point. How do you tell it that? Okay, take a look at the top bar. You see that flashing flag? That is the indicator that we are in manual sampling mode. But it is also a hint for you about how you're going to tell the Xplorer GLX to record a point. You actually get to use that flag button finally. Push it, and we've recorded a data point, and now the Xplorer GLX is asking us what we want to associate, what chemical we want to associate with that. So we will type in juice. This is cranberry juice. So it's actually cranberry raspberry juice. We're just going to type in juice. Oh, okay. What you need to know, see that F3 button right there? That lets us turn off the number locks. So let's do that and try this again. J. U. I. And when we're done, you push F1 for OK. Do we want to treat this column as text data? Yes, we do. F1 or for OK. And there's our first point, and we're ready to move on to the next point. Okay, put it in our next sample there. Give it a second to get used to it. And push the flag button to record the data point, and this is water. And for the sake of keeping things moving along, I will call it H2O. So H, and I'll turn on the num lock to get to the 2. Turn it off again, and O. Okay. Next. Aren't you glad we only have 3 samples? Put it in there. Hit the flag button. And this is an antacid. A. N. Where's the T? A. C. Okay. We are now done with data collection, and at the end of data collection, you push the start-stop button. Now we know the pH of each of our chemicals, so we can classify each of them as an acid or a base. To do that, we need to add a third column to our table, and there are a couple ways we can do that, but the easiest way is to go to your edit menu by pushing the F3 button. Item number 1 on there is new data column. Let's go ahead and push the check mark to select it. And now we have a third data column labeled data column 2, it's editable data column. We want to give it a different name. We don't want it to be called data 2. We want it to call it classification so we can classify our chemicals. Turn on the hotspots so that we can change out the name of that column heading. Push the check mark to select it, and you see item number 5 there, data properties. That lets us change the data properties for the item that we have selected. Measurement name is not data 2. We're going to call it classification, or abbreviated, we'll just call it class. Okay. All right. Now we can actually type in acid or base, except for you can't. Because you see that dashed box? That is a navigation box, which means you can navigate using the arrow keys to existing editable cells, but you can't edit with it. When you're ready to edit a cell, you push the F2 button, which is the Edit Cell button. Now we've got a solid rectangular box with a flashing cursor in it. This is called the editing box. Isn't it nice how that works out? We can actually now type in text. Did you try it? You get numbers again. Okay. Let's turn off the number lock by going to the Edit menu, F3, and item number 4 there, selected. It's a check mark. Let's select it to uncheck it. And now we are ready to type in text. So we will call juice at a pH of 2.4 and acid. Okay, and push the check mark to move the next down to the next cell, and we see treat this column as text data. And let me point one thing out to you real quickly. You see that padlock with the number 9 there? That indicates that this editable data column is meant for numerical data. As soon as we say OK to this screen where it asks us if we want this to be text data, watch what happens to that padlock. There it goes, it's gone. Okay, now we can call this 6.1. That is pretty close to a neutral, so we will call it neutral. In U, or E, excuse me, U, T, and check mark to move that box down. And at 7.1, our antacid is also neutral. There. And L. And push the check mark. Make sure after the last one that you do push the check mark to accept that. And now we've got an editing box. Just so you know, if you want to ever change that back to a navigating box, you can do that by pushing the escape key. So quick review, to make it an editing box, you push F2. To make it a navigating box, you push the escape key. Didn't I tell you there was a lot of good stuff in this activity? But there is one more thing I want to show you. Let's go back out to the home screen. And from here, let's go to a graph display. Now you see you've got a graph of pH versus time. You can actually see how much time your students are messing around between samples. But that's not the cool thing I wanted to show you. Let's go to our hotspots by pushing the check mark. And go to your x-axis measurement time. Push the check mark to select it. And select item 2, our chemical measurement there. And I'm going to move the origin a little bit, and I actually show you how to do this in another activity so you're not missing anything by not following along this time. Take a look at our graph now. You see that we actually have a visual representation of the relative differences between pH of each of our samples, which is very nice for your visual learners. I told you a lot of great stuff in this activity. So now that you have all the tools, go ahead and try it out.